G'day everybody, how are you going today? It is so good to see you, and thank you so much for the amazing response to my 25,000 video. I cannot thank you all enough. Today I want to talk about some of my favourite and at the same time most successful images that I've ever created, and they happen to span a 30-year period. So I've got images that I took 30 years ago that are still as relevant today as they were when they were taken. Now, it's easy for us all to get excited about the gear. I mean, look at this amazing piece of gear here. This is my Hasselblad medium format camera. It's got a sensor about as big as this screen here. Costs like, I think it was $30,000 or $40,000 new, I can't quite remember. It weighs an absolute ton and it makes absolutely amazing images. And one of the images in this selection of my favourites is taken by this very camera. And indeed, cameras are important. Absolutely, they're important to capturing the image. But there's so much more for us to do than simply capturing the image. Of course, we capture it, and that's super important, and that moment in time is critical. But then there's so much more to what can happen to an image next. And in the case of a professional photographer like me, who has made my entire living out of photography, well, there's a lot that happens to the image after it's taken. It's part one, sometimes of a 2-part, sometimes of a 5-part, sometimes of a 10-part series of events to get it to turn into income. How I can back the fact that these are absolutely the top of my pyramid, the top of my food chain, is I have chosen to publish them and recreate them thousands and thousands of times. So let's jump into some of my favourite images of all time, why I chose them, and how they've gone, what's the reaction been, and how were they created. So there are a few ways that I get to reproduce images in the thousands. And what I'm going to show you today is books, calendars, and journals. Another area that I have printed thousands and thousands of copies is posters and greeting cards. But if you like this video, we can talk about those in another video. Please let me know in the comments below. Firstly, I want to start with what I think is the oldest image in this list, and it is 30.5 years old, almost to the day, today. And that is this image here, known as New St Kilda Pier. This was taken in 1991 on St Kilda Pier in St Kilda, Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. You can Google it, you can go look right now where this pier is. This pier is still here. This kiosk is still here, although it burnt down and they replicated it, so it's exactly the same. This was taken when I was either 19 or 20. I would have been photographing on my Pentax K1000. I don't think I had my Pentax SFXn at that point in time, and probably Ilford FP4, which is 125 ISO or ASA, as we said back in the day, film. Now, I remember I was shooting on my Kiron, which I think was a Kiron 28-210 lens, and I'm going to show you right now the camera. And this is the very camera I took the image on. This is a Pentax K1000 with a Kiron 28-210 lens, which was a 3.8 round to f32 lens. This shot most of my images probably for about the first 5 years. This is all I had. So when we talk about it not being the gear, it really wasn't. This is all I had, and it is all that I needed. One of the reasons photographers, working professional photographers, buy the latest gear is because we can. When I started, I couldn't, because I didn't have any money. I started with almost nothing, about $500 in my pocket. So sometimes it's just necessity that you start with the bare basics. One of the reasons this image looks like this is because it was a super foggy day. And back then I was processing my own black and white film, I was rolling my own black and white film, and I was printing my own black and white prints, doing it all in a darkroom set up at home. And I used to love ultra high contrast. I still pretty much kind of do. But certainly in this era, 30 years ago, that is exactly what I loved. I didn't print color. It was much harder to print color prints, so I was just doing black and white. And so here we have this very almost binary black and white, almost no gray in this image, very little gray in this image. And I just love it. I think I've probably sold close to 50,000 copies of it. There's been almost 2,000 copies just here as this book cover, and I do believe the book cover is very important. The image is very important in selling the book. Greeting card wise, there would be over 15,000 greeting cards. I've sold almost 4,000 copies of the poster, and then for 30 years, I've been selling prints. It would be easily 50,000 copies of this image. So it has been super successful. Now, why has it been successful? Well, I think it's a mixture of timelessness and iconic, as well as obviously the basics of photography, framing and storytelling and so on. I'm super excited that actually someone recently bought a calendar and this image in a something like 3 foot wide, 1 meter wide poster, and it's heading off to Germany. I don't know if they're an expat or what, but thank you. This image continues to stand the test of time. So when you're selecting images for important moments, whether it's the cover of a book or the cover of a calendar, yeah, you got to think long and hard about it. But I have to say that a lot of these decisions are instinctual as well. Do I like it? Because I continue to do this based on what I like, not anything else. It's like, do I like it? Do I love it? Does it excite me? Yeah, I want to put it on the cover of a book. And when I was making my first book, and here it is, it's Melbourne, A Love Affair, I did make the decision to do 3 different jackets, just in case. Now, one of the reasons that I did that was like, if the stores want to have all of them, then they would have to buy probably 1 or 2 copies of each. So what it helped facilitate was more orders because I had more jackets. Also, it meant I could do market testing and understand which jacket was more popular. Now, you're going to see all 3. I will do the 3rd one next, and I'd love you to let me know which one you think was the most popular jacket. You might already know because I've talked about it before, but you can let me know. Now, this is Deckard. I've talked a lot about Blade Runner. Well, this is named after the lead character in Blade Runner, Deckard, Harrison Ford's character, because it was a rainy cityscape taken in 2009, so almost 20 years after the previous image. I absolutely love this image. One of my goals was to try and photograph rain at night. And this was when the technology, we're in the sort of D3 era now, coming up on the D4 era, but this is still the D3, where we were able to shoot at high ISOs, handheld, shorter shutter speeds, and still be able to create an image like this. Now, if we look closely at this image, we can actually see the raindrops falling at night. This was difficult to achieve prior to high ISOs being a thing. Now, what's funny about this image is that the focus point is actually here on the ground, and the background is out of focus. It's just kind of, this little area here is the only part that's in focus. Now, a lot of people might say, why are you putting an image that's pretty much got almost nothing in focus on the cover of a book? And there's a whole lot of reasons. Firstly, I just love the color, the shape, the vibe, the emotion. It's really evocative of place. Now, you don't need everything to be in focus to evoke place. There's so much more to art and photography than sharp focus. So much more. And this is a cover of a book. And this image here has sold thousands and thousands of copies, yet almost none of it is in focus. You might say there's no subject. You might say there's nothing going on here. But there is a lot going on here, and it truly tells a story of time and place. Don't worry about specs. Don't worry about if you have the best X, Y, or Z. Worry about, is your photography communicating? Is it reaching out to its intended audience? that's actually your number one goal. The technical stuff comes second. If you can't emotionally connect with your audience, then you've failed regardless of how cool your camera is. So this here is another one of my favorite images, Deckard. And here we have the third photographic jacket of the book Melbourne: A Love Affair. There were two other jackets, the orange and the white. They were not photographic. They were for people who wanted absolute minimalism. So for those that know about Pulp Fiction, this was shot on a Canon pocket camera, an 8 megapixel Canon S80 back in 2006. This is my either highest or second highest selling image of all time. Cover of the book, greeting cards, postcards, and I've just sold a lot of originals, canvases and prints. What is it that makes this image so successful? What's it about? Because it's certainly not about technology. It's 8 megapixels. It is a cropped sensor or even a smaller sensor camera. And it was quite difficult to pull this shot off. I basically left a bar. I'd had enough of being in the bar. I walked out into the rain. I went, this is awesome. I didn't have a tripod. I didn't have a shutter release cable. I had to put the camera on top of a slippery, wet rubbish bin / trash can. Cheeky aside to show you the process of the image Pulp Fiction. So here I am in the bar. This is actually in the bar. We can see here it's the 25th of February. This is how we do dates here in Australia. Day, month, year. So it's the 25th of February 2006 and it's 10:41 p.m. And as we can see up here, this is the Canon PowerShot S80. For some reason, some of these are JPEGs and some of these are not. Anyway, left the bar, and this is one of the first images that I saw. The bar is just down the laneway down here. And this is me just starting to get a sense of what am I going to make of this image. And you can see down here the cafe and the bookstore, which end up being the heroes of the image. The reason I want to show you this is you can see what happens before the image and you can see what happens after the image. Now I want to show you this image because this here, this object here, which is a bit hard to make out, for some reason there's a bit of camera shake because you can see I've put the camera on a park bench here, but this is the rubbish bin or trash can as they're known in North America. This is the rubbish bin where I placed the camera. Then I looked towards this scene here. So that's pretty cool. And then this is an image that I took after the most famous shot. This has also been a pretty successful shot, although I have not removed these cars but changed them slightly because I didn't like the way that they looked, but I loved this shot. Yellow umbrella. And you can even see, if you look up here, in the top corner here, this is my finger, my hand, protecting the camera from the rain. So there you go. There is a little bit of history of this image as it unfolded. And we can now see, if we quickly look at the times, let's go through them again. From here, 11:28 to here, 11:29 to here, 11:31. So it all happened very quickly. And that's how I do things. I had to put it on self-timer. This camera, one of the reasons I bought it was because you could dial up still manual aperture and shutter. So I was able to dial up the settings that I wanted. I put it on timer. I had one hand below just in case it slid off in the wet rain, the camera, and one above to try and stop the rain from hitting the lens because these sorts of cameras are not overly well weather sealed. And I was able to create that image, which has become just simply so iconic. 2006, 15 years ago, it still sells well today. And in a recent video, just this week, I was stretching the latest version of it, sold in 1.5 meters or 60 inches wide across. So it's not about the technical, and you will often hear people saying who understand the realities of it, clients never ask you, what camera did you use to take this shot? They don't buy a shot because of the camera, they buy it because there's some sort of response going on in here, and there is a whole range of reasons as to why they're responding, and we can talk about that in another video. But I cannot stress enough, this was taken on a pocket camera, 8 megapixels. Everything about it was non-high tech, but here it is, the most popular image that I have ever created. And what we're going to do now is jump back to 1992, an image called Tramed. Now this is in the days where high ISO was not a possibility, shooting on 125 ISO ASA FP4. I've got a tripod and I'm having to dodge the trams. This tram had just gone past. This tram was coming towards me, so I had to just move over to this side to get this shot. Now again, I love this shot a lot, and I love it so much that I stuck it on the cover of my second book, Melbourne A Love Affair, the Mini, and it's one of 3 covers on that book. And what I love about this image, 29 years old now, it still sells, it still helps to sell this book, is that there's movement and emotion. And again, if you've ever been to Melbourne, and this book is all about Melbourne, it's all about Melbourne, so it makes sense that you create a Melbourne image. This is really evocative of what it's like to cross the road in Melbourne, to see the trams going up and down the boulevard. If you've been to San Francisco, it's like a cable car, and there are trams all over the world. This wasn't taken with high-tech equipment. This probably was, by 1992, my Pentax SFXn, probably with that same lens, because I never bought an upgrade to this lens until I moved over to the Nikon system. And if I wasn't on that lens, then I would have been on the kit lens that I got, which was something like a 24-75, 3.5 to 5.6 that came with my SFXn, which I found. I have it somewhere. I'm just not sure where it is. Again, it's not about the technology, it's about what it evokes. And this has continued to be a high-selling greeting card, a high-selling poster, and I've sold a lot of copies of that image. Let's move to the next. And here we have an image known as Green and Gold. Now, this is photographed in 2014, just after the Sony A7R original edition was released. And I was so pumped about the idea of mirrorless, so I picked up the very first full-frame Sony that came out. The A7R and the A7 came out at the very end of 2013. This was like a few weeks after I bought it. Now I had an adapter made by, I think, Metabones, which adapted my F-glass to E-mount. And here I was using a tilt shift lens. So all of this is done in camera. I love what it evokes. I love tilt shift in camera, because what you can do is you can make areas out of focus, but us as humans, we still understand what's going on. We can still tell what's happening here, but it draws our focus to the point that you want the viewer to focus on. And in this case, it was about sitting down and having a coffee. This was a very early Sunday morning. The sun had just come up. It's streaming here, great shadows, great colors. I really love this image, and I love the fact that it's all in camera. And again, it's not about the gear. With a tilt shift lens, everything's manual. With a tilt shift lens adapted to a Sony back then, Nikon to a Sony, it's all just manual. And it's about the moment. I love capturing these moments. And next, the third cover for the Melbourne Mini book. This is known as Love Junk. Now, Love Junk was photographed on the Hasselblad that I showed you earlier. This is such an astonishing file, 60 megapixels, medium format. The way this camera captures detail and texture is just off the charts. I mean, with all of these images, I can blow them up to massive canvases. Canvases are very tolerant because of the texture on the canvas. You can blow up. I've blown up the Pulp Fiction 8 megapixel file to over 2 meters, over 6 feet. Now that's pretty much stretching its limit. 12 megapixels, no problem. You can go that large. So, but this image, you can blow it up to 2.5 to 3 meters. I've done that, and there's so much information there in these 16-bit beautiful Hasselblad files that there's no limits. But again, you know, what am I shooting here? I'm shooting a garbage truck. This is why it's called Love Junk, because there's a garbage truck and there's a couple kissing here in the corner. It's late at night, it's been raining. I was walking out in the streets with this super expensive, really more a studio camera than anything else, and some guy looked at me and said, "Is that a Hasselblad?" I said, "Yeah, you know, this is what I do, street photography. You've got to go out there and use the gear. You can't just baby it." Now, I do love this image because it is a very Melbourne moment. You've got a laneway which is very famous for its street art. You've got Federation Square, which is a major arts precinct. Just behind it, you've got lovers kissing, you've got the rain, you've got the colour, you've got the textures. For me, this just sums up a really sumptuous, busy and exciting photograph. Now, just to do a quick sidebar note about that, of course, these images are all cityscapes. And of course, there's many, many different types of photography. But right now, we're talking in the context of cityscapes. This image is from 2016. It's been super popular in the 5 years that it's existed. But of course, I don't have the same long history to understand what it might do over time. But I certainly can tell, and you can tell by people's reactions when they see these images, and this is one of the great advantages of having, say, a gallery or somewhere where your work is represented and people can just react to it. You really get a sense of how you're going. And I do believe doing these things in person is better than doing them over the net. So I think in person you can have much more of a clearer, open dialogue. That's if you're prepared to accept and engage in that dialogue. I mean, we're not always necessarily interested in negative feedback, are we? But honest feedback is great. This is the cover of my journal, which I published in 2004. Originally made 4,000 copies of this. Hardly got any left. If you'd like one, jump on the website. We are starting to run out. This is a beautiful little thing. It's A5 in size, so half of A4, and it's filled with pictures, but it's a notebook, so you can just write your murmurings and ideas. But this image, which I call Hipster Approach, there was a period in time, and it's probably happened globally, where the fixed wheel, no gears, and in some cases no brake bicycles became super cool. I'm not sure why. If you're going really fast and you can't brake, some people did tend to run into things. I know they tried really hard to avoid it, and they were often exceptional cyclists, but still cruising at high speeds without brakes, and the only way you can brake is to push down backwards hard on the crank that just keeps spinning. It wasn't necessarily the best way to do things, especially in a modern city when we have all other different types of modes of transport. But anyway, that's a side note. This image here, taken on what would have been, I would say, a D810 or the D800E back in 2014, again on the tilt shift. Now, I love colour. Like, if you're going to shoot colour, then find crazy colour. And I like crazy colour when it's real. This is really what's happening. Over here, there was a giant TV screen. That's what was creating the blue light here at the bottom. And then this building here is yellow. They've actually recently repainted it, and it's slightly less crazy yellow. And there's also a cyclist flying through here. But again, a very successful image and very evocative of the Melbourne experience. You can stand here on a corner and see this very view. That is Hipster Approach. I don't have any of last year's calendar here right now, but that is that image over there, which is called Capital Idea. Photographed on the Z6 with a very manual Nikon old lens, the 50mm 1.2. And just as a quick side note, I have just been sent this lens here. This is a Z mount 1.2 50mm manual lens, and it's made by Miki, and I look forward to testing that out up against the Nikon Z 50mm 1.2. So this lens that I used to shoot this other one, fully manual, I think the lens is something like 40 years old, and I just had such a ball photographing with this old lens. Now, of course, all of the old F lenses, every single one, you stick it on a Z body with the F to Z adapter, and it becomes stabilized. So I love shooting at nighttime, handheld, and I was able to walk around at night and create these images. I love this image so much, it ended up being the cover of the calendar, and it has gone on to be a very successful image and a successful calendar, of course. So from this list of images, this is the newest one from 2020, although I did want to touch on this year's calendar. This is another image I also like. But it's really hard for me to choose because pretty much every image in this calendar I'm super pumped about, and I would almost make any of them the cover of a book. Perhaps if I had to choose one, the one that I'm most excited about, I will show you. But it's portrait. Now, portrait is very difficult to put on books and things. You have to have a, well, it's okay if you have a portrait-shaped book. Greeting cards don't sell as much as they used to, but portrait is fine for greeting cards, and it's also fine for posters, which I did mass produce, I think 24,000 posters back in the day. Maybe it's time, because it's been, I think it was 2002 or 2004 that I made my last range of posters. Might be time to make a new range. What do you think? Another set of 4 classic black and whites. I've got like almost 20 years of imagery to choose from. I think this image here, if I was going to choose an image to close on, it would be this image here. I just adore this image. There's a video that you can watch up here about this particular image. I'm not sure what it is about it. I think it's the stillness. I think it's the depth. I think it's the grandeur, the textures. For me, this sort of image has so much going on. Like, there's heaps going on. Some people might say there's nothing going on and it's still. But for me, there's actually so much going on, and I get so much out of an image like this. I can just kind of sit and stare at it. So there you have it. There is just a handful of my most successful images over the years. There are so many more. Like, it's super hard to choose. And as I said, this year's calendar, I absolutely adore all of them. And how do you do it? How do you choose? How do you choose if you're wanting to make a calendar, make a book, create a website? How do you choose what's going to be your favorites? It's got to first start with, why did you take the photograph in the first place? When I walk around today, I can see images straight away that I think I'm going to be pretty excited about. So you're kind of creating a short list just by where you point your camera. And then when you download them and you cull them, you're creating another short list. And that's what I do. I basically go, is this a keeper or not? And if it gets 5 stars, if it's an absolute, folio piece most of the time, and 4 stars or less just means it's not a folio piece, but I'm interested in it for some other reason. So you are the #1 judge of your work, and that's all there is to it. If you're not doing what drives your passion, then you won't stick at this for years and decades. So it simply has to come down to you. And then when you're putting together a piece like this or a book, sure, it's okay to consult others that you trust and make sure that they check their egos at the door before they come and give you advice. It can be a big issue if someone's, for example, jealous of what you're doing. They can bring that jealousy to the table, and it can cloud their judgment. So you've got to talk to people that you absolutely trust in helping you make a shortlist, especially if you're creating something like a book or a calendar. These are massive investments, and you've got to get it right. So it's also pretty important to get more than one opinion. But I have to restate, at the end of the day, this is your work, and you've got to back it. And if you're paying for it, then you've got to be able to stand by your decisions and not be able to at a later date go, oh, well, Mary said do this, so I did it, and now it didn't work out. Or Brad. Mary or Brad. Doesn't matter who said it. So back yourself. And at the end of the day, there is no guarantees whether the choices that we make or the work that we create is going to be embraced by the general populace. That's something that's left up to the gods, basically. But I have never adjusted what I love to shoot based on what I think anybody's looking for. That to me spells the end of your magic. Your magic needs to be about you, your mind, and your heart. That's it. Don't worry about what other people think. So there you go. There's a little bit of a look into my process and some of the decisions that I've made and what I love and how they've gone. I'm very happy to talk about this stuff at length. If anybody has any questions, maybe what we can do here is put all the questions, maybe if you could put your questions in the comments, and then I can make a reply video pertaining to your questions. That'd be cool. All right, it's been fantastic to see you, and if this is your first time here, I'd love to see you again, so please subscribe, please share, and please like. And of course, all these things we've seen, I didn't want this to be an ad, but they are on my website, most of them, so if you're excited by any of it, you can jump there and grab something. All right, I do love your work, I do look forward to seeing you soon, and please do look after yourself and get out and take some shots. It's so good for our mental health. All right, all the best and take care.